Recording in progress.
Pat is who we're going to.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hey, thanks everybody for your patience. We'll get started in just one moment. Yeah, we're gonna- Yep.
This way.
Swap it.
Put your chargers. I had my own, but this is work. This is one. Somebody's? Okay, so we'll just let it run. And we'll just slow us down. We'll just leave it. For the TV studio.
All right. Everybody ready? All right, time being 7 o'clock, I call to order the Franklin School Committee meeting. Thank you everyone for your patience tonight. Meetings are recorded by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 29, as well as recorded by Franklin Matters. All right, we got a light agenda items, but obviously a big meeting here with the public budget hearing. But we'll start though, we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as is customary, we'll pause for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. All right, so yeah, this is an exciting time of the year. It's budget season. We get to do the line-by-line reading, go through the ins and outs of everything related to the budget. Thank you all for those who are here at council chambers and those online and watching at home. Lucas, you and your team, this is incredible work. I know it's been a very accelerated timeline that we've asked you to put this all together, but it's coming along wonderfully. And so just to kind of set the stage, what will happen in a moment, we'll officially open the public budget hearing for FY26. And then Superintendent Jagir has a presentation for us. We'll be able to kind of answer some questions. And then we'll do the line-by-line reading, where if you have any kind of questions, comments, or want some just deliberation on any specific item, that's when anybody can we'll shout out if they have a hold. We'll kind of put those aside, continue on with the rest of the reading, and then once that's been completed, then we'll go back and go down the line for all the holds, ask questions until everyone is comfortable and ready to kind of release that hold. Basically, so they're good with the answers and the numbers. There'll be opportunities for members of the public to ask questions, comments as well. And then, once that's all taken care of, then we'll close this public hearing, and then it'll be on the meeting on the 11th. So next Tuesday, because we can't go a Tuesday without a school committee meeting anymore. That's when we'll officially, that's where we'll be looking to vote on the budget. So, that being said, I will entertain a motion to open the FY26 public budget hearing.
Motion to open the FY26 Franklin Public Schools budget hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call. Griffith?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Callahan, yes. Sampali?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. Superintendent Jagir, take it away.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your opening remarks, Mr. Callahan. Just set the stage on how this meeting will go. This is our budget hearing. It's the only agenda item we have on tonight. To help orient us, for those who either watched last week or are tuning in for the first time, I provided a brief budget hearing presentation that pulls out some of the key points throughout this budget development process in an effort to try to help add context to the budget and the recommendations. So with that said, I'd like to invite up our interim school business administrator, Ms. Jana Malati, to join me at the table, and also our former school business administrator and consultant, Dr. Dutch, to come to the table. Both of these folks have been pivotal in creating this budget, helping to put this all together based on our priorities, drivers, obligations, the results of our reorganization, which we'll talk a little bit about, but leading that work from the financial perspective and the numbers part has been really a benefit to our town to have both of them working together, and I couldn't be prouder of the work that they've done to help with this process. So with that said, I'm going to kick right in. We'll share the mic, and this is meant to be more of an expedited version so we can get to the line by line, but certainly want to just set some context. So the theme for the budget was laying the foundation for success. We're really looking at three key areas. We're looking to stabilize our systems, build sustainability within the budget model. We're looking to reallocate our resources, which we talked a lot about last meeting and previous meetings around reallocating staff and funding to maintain some important priorities we have within the district, which we'll talk about around class size and whatnot. And the third is really about developing comprehensive plans and continuing to see those plans realized that we began in the spring to make sure that we're providing the best education and in the context of reorganizing to implement for next school year. So you've seen this, an overview about us, just putting it back out there for folks so they can get a sense of the number of schools, the number of staff that we have in teachers, and then total employees, and lays that out for folks. This is all included in the budget book, which is posted online for folks listening and watching for that. And we will be providing additional documents as well as we go through this process. You're well aware of the objectives and the portrait of a graduate. And then the executive summary. I think it's important to note a few key things. The budget overview really talks about this budget represents $80,395,338, which is a 3.78% increase over FY25, which results in a $2.9 million increase to what we had in previous years. I want to note, it's in bold here, but I think just to be clear, and we talked a little bit about this at the last joint budget listening session, and we received feedback from the workshop around being super clear about this. This is based on solving a $3.6 million at this time structural deficit in our town. So just to be clear, we've put our best foot forward, and we'll talk about the decisions that you made as a committee, the actions we've taken as a district to try to put ourselves in the best position we can, but ultimately the budget reflects this $3.6 million structural deficit being solved. The total with grants puts us at 88.8, and we'll talk a lot about the savings from reorganization and the reallocation and not adding additional positions that cost additional funding. The key drivers, really talking about those staffing adjustments and savings from the reorg, and then really trying to keep up with some compliance and inflation costs that we need to mitigate. So I'll move on to the next slide, and I'll kick it over to Jana to talk through just these pieces.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So this is a quick breakdown of the proposed, thank you. A quick breakdown of the proposed operating budget, which Mr. Jagier mentioned previously. The operating budget request is $80,395,338, which represents the 3.78% increase over FY25. And important to note again, this is based on solving the town's structural deficit of $3.6 million. The total FY26 budget request with grants and revolving comes up at $88,869,181, which represents a 3.71% increase. What does that include? Includes the operating budget request, includes $3.6 million in circuit breaker, $1.97 million in grants, and $2.81 million in revolving funds.
Okay. So just quick, we put this slide up last week, and it talks a lot about, well, what would happen if we get this question, if we hadn't reorganized, what would that number look like? So to provide that level of service that we're providing today, based on that reorganization, you can see the difference in costs associated with a level service without reorganizing and a level service with, which is where we landed all the way to the right. We talked a little bit about this, strategic staffing adjustments to enhance student learning, class size ratios, staying within those class sizes you see there, and strengthening student supports, maintaining the level of mental and behavioral health services that we provide, and among other supports across the district. Those drivers, fixed obligations, right? Salary, benefits, health insurance, reinvesting in student learning, I just hit on that, and then efficiency and cost control. So looking at transportation contracts, our special education cost management, with Mrs. Morano will talk to. So despite all of these, that strategic reallocation does allow us to sustain, to the best degree we can, some of those student services without increasing our FTEs, and we'll model that out for you shortly. So I'll just kick this over to Ms. Bellotti.
And you see there the budget obligations, the transportation costs that went over by 12.2% over FY25. Those are contractual costs. Special education went up by 3.67%. Health insurance, as you are all aware, went up by approximately 13%. And salaries, which includes staffs, went up by 2.3 million.
Okay. I'll kick it over to Dr. Rogers for the general education.
So as we spoke about last meeting, these are the different drivers that are in the general education line items, which include major cost drivers, include staff costs, programming for students, services, all instructional curriculum resources, I'd add professional development, things of that nature, and then extracurricular activities for students, and transportation costs are also included.
Transportation. Okay.
And there you see a breakdown of transportation comparison over the years. Those are for the big yellow bus, and the years go back from FY23, and the comparisons through FY26. In FY24, you see a 7% increase, FY25 a 4% increase, and FY26 a large increase of 12%.
Special education costs vary from year to year, from moment to moment. Obviously, our costs depend on the needs of the students that are in front of us. So we can budget the best we can for the students we have in front of us. However, if new students move in or require more specialized instruction or more services, there might be costs that we were unable to budget for. So we do our best we can to budget for the students that we have in front of us. Obviously, we try to keep students in districts as much as possible. We do have, as I spoke of last week and many years before, we have our in-district programs. If we have a cohort of students who require specific methodologies to access their curriculum, we develop a in-district program, which allows our students to stay within the district, but is also a cost savings, because if we do have to send these students to more restrictive setting out of district, those costs go up, which we'll most likely see on the next slide, I would imagine. As we did a cost comparison of our in-district programs, our goals program, REACH program, these are our programs where we typically, if we didn't have these programs in district, it's very possible that these students would go out of district. And you see that we have over a $5 million cost savings by keeping the students in district.
Okay, thank you.
And there you see a special education transportation cost comparison from FY24 through FY26. Increases in FY24 were a little higher than FY26.
Okay, so just, this has been covered a lot, but basically we've unified to one middle school. We've talked about the elementary schools and the ECDC expansion, which ultimately led to building the budget. I spoke about this. If you want to look at last week's presentation, there's clips you can probably find on YouTube on different aspects of this, but basically we talked a lot about the behind-the-scene works that went into really putting a budget together that created the realignment and built out a zero-based budget. The drivers and the strategy for that and how we've organized ourselves is really focused on our enrollment. So this is a slide we didn't provide last week, but we added it again this year to just look at the enrollment projections. It came up at one of the listening sessions just around this idea. So I added some breakdowns on the right-hand side, which kind of talk through the forecasting and what it looks like over time. So I show where we are in comparison to Dr. McKibben's estimation, all within a range. You know, for example, elementary's up 18 students from his projection. In the grand scheme of things, when you think about that, you know, that's within a range. And then you'll notice that the enrollment, it's steady increase of approximately 100 kids from 25 to 33. That's what's projected right now, and that's what we've been using for our numbers as we look at, you know, how we've reorganized the district. These were all considerations that went into it. So with this in mind, how did we create our schools? I put this slide up last week, but it just talks through what this budget represents and the types of opportunities we're able to offer around stability in class sizes across the board. And we knew this, we spoke about this in the spring, but to realize it and be able to provide this information now provides just a follow-up on conversations that were happening within the community. And we hope this helps provide some context. Just understanding that level service. So the way we approach this is we built out and said, what do we need? What positions are currently in existence that are necessary for us to continue with the students? And then look at, well, now let's look at the ratios and the caseloads and all those different aspects and figure out, do we have the right number of people that we need? And from there, we were able to identify that there were certain positions that better support the system as a whole or support expansion at ECDC or a variety of things. And that's where you see the reclassification. So there's two things at folding out right now. You have this restructuring. We've determined that there are certain economies of scale in certain positions. And as a result, you no longer need certain positions. But what we found is there are other positions where you need, because you put more students together in one location, for example. And that's where you'll see those reclassifications. In addition, we broke out restorations. Restorations are previously reduced positions. So when I think of the reductions that we needed to make in the spring and in the summer, in our model now, and the challenge we faced in doing that, and the loss, as we've reorganized schools, these particular positions were able to be restored into the budget. Okay, that's included in this budget. For example, our class sizes, you'll see some elementary teacher positions in there, in order to get those class sizes back in range on the previous slide that I showed. There are other positions when you think about having the number of students we'll have under one roof where we're able to do that. So I just want to be clear about what these positions, these are not additions, these are just reclassifications that we would have. In addition to that, we have determined that we were able to reduce 20 positions within the budget in order to land at an estimated $1.8 million in a cost savings within our budget. So I think the question came up around the detail of that, and rather than the situation we were facing in the summer, where we were forced to make those cuts to resolve and rectify and have a budget that was meeting the number, this was done as a part of the process of reorganization, okay? These are still realized reductions that allowed our budget to come in where it came in. So I just want to be clear about how that came out to be.
There you see the school salary budget lines. We went through it last week. It hasn't changed. Same goes for expenses lines.
I'm going to get into this in more detail in a little bit.
And there you see a breakdown of all the grants that you have available for FY '26, included the emergency assistance shelter, which is highlighted, and you can see the bottom line.
It's highlighted because the question came up in the community. Mrs. Malati put together a memo for all of you. The funding we receive from the state is what's used to support the education of students who are residing in the emergency assistance shelter. So that money goes to the students who are being educated in Franklin to help support their education through those funds. They have to be used for that direct benefit. Much like any other revolving opportunity that we have, or revolving account, it must be applied for the direct benefit of the reason it was collected. All right.
And there you see the revolving and all the funding sources. We have a breakdown in FY '25 revenue to date. That's how much we brought in up to date, up until January 26th. You have your FY '26 proposed, and which still represents a decrease from last year by 10%, 10.25% decrease.
Okay. So the budget story here, the recap, if you will, just before we get into the line by line, is really around the total budget request is an $80.395 or $80.4 million budget with an increase of 3.78. That's based on solving the town's our town's structural deficit. There are savings from reorganization that amount to approximately $1.8 million in this, off of what the request would have been for level service. And then there's a reallocation of resources that are not an increase to our total FTE. We've seen that reduction. Okay, so I just want to point those things out. This budget supports just what it supports. If you're looking for a boiled down version, it's around preserving the class sizes. You can go back to the slides and see these. Restoring previously cut positions, we've included. Reducing transportation and athletic fees, we've spoken about that. The budget is including. That model is around trying to get the fees back into a reasonable fee structure comparable to other communities where we were. Not to be exact, and I want to be very clear, we're going to do everything we can, and there will be some restoration of that as part of this budget that was baked in. The final thing is sustaining our mental health and behavioral health services that we've worked so hard through multiple years of budget requests to build up. To keep it in here was a win as far as I'm concerned. And then strengthen our academics tiered supports, which we've built up over time. You've seen presentations in the past from where we were. And then finally, just re-enhancing or reallocating our FTEs to really support programming. The assumptions are around your contractual obligations you have, the transportation, special education, and healthcare costs are all part of what those assume. And we've modeled that. I know the question was, what would be on the chopping block if we didn't? Well, there's a couple scenarios that would need to play out. Either a decrease in funding. Anything funded less than 80.395 would not represent the budget and the lines that we put before you. So that would mean we would need to look at it. If we didn't solve the structural deficit, for example, there would be, we wouldn't have the money we need to do this. That's one. Any change in a budget assumption can change a budget. So that's another reason that everything we're putting forth today could change. And finally, the question became around what would be reduced. Reductions may include the restored positions. We'd have to look at some of the current reclassified positions, the programming, extra co-curriculars, and any type of district and school expenses are all part of what would be included in there. And then other impacts could include, obviously, moving our class size the way we've modeled it. If the model we put in this slide deck and in the budget book is based off of this 80.395 allocation. If it's less than that, it would mean that we would have to look at staffing, which could impact your class sizes. It could reduce some of the programming, mental health and behavioral supports, your academic, everything that we just talked about that's baked in. Maintaining fees, it would mean keeping fees where they are, and then finally, possibly, depending on what shape we're in, you may have to look at other fees. And I don't say that as a threat. I mean that more as just a process that you should go through as a school committee, and we should be providing that, to look at, are our fees in line? And I'm talking about rentals, student activities, things like that, that are fees that you have not necessarily gone to. And these are all part of it. So that's the best detail I can give you at this moment in time to try to provide the picture. How Franklin compares, these are slides that we provided before, but it just goes through our per pupil expenditure and where we are, and some of the changes in enrollment, but changes in need and how that has impacted our budget, right? Dr. Dutch talked about these slides. The net school spending equation, it's been covered a few times now publicly, and we'll have that information available. And then what's next is the line by line, but I have a timeline that I'll review at the end, just to go through some of the next steps within our process. So with that said, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions about that before we get into the line by line.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much for, again, all the work that went into this. Any questions?
No questions, just some comments. As Chair Callahan had stated, thank you for all the hard work that you all have put in. Just looking at the budget line item, great improvements, so thank you. I felt like you were reading my mind when I was going through this. So, but for the presentation, can we go back to the breakdown slide? Just one thing I want to make sure folks are clear about. It was like way at the beginning, where we talk about solving our structural deficit. Yeah, that slide here. I just want folks to be clear that this is not necessarily the school solving the structural deficit. This is town-wide, and with I would assume that it would be with a successful override being passed. So I don't want people to think, okay, what is the school going to do? Because this is now much larger than the school scope. I think we've done, and by we, central office and the staff has done a commendable job to meet the budget ask and through reorganization, all the other stuff to hit the numbers that we were allotted. But this is bigger than the schools, and this is the community that needs to come into play. The second piece was around the bus slide. And it just dawned on me as I was looking at this, because these numbers don't necessarily indicate that this is because we're getting more buses. I think it'd be nice to see a comparison in FY23, how many buses we had in year over year. And I know we have like a transportation meeting coming up. I think that would be good to see, so that folks could see, and sorry, more work for you, Colin, I apologize. But it'd be eye-opening to see, you know, and I don't know if the numbers are, I'm just making this up, but we'll say FY25 had 20 buses, but FY24 had 19, you know, like. Okay, yeah, so I think just so folks can get a context as to like just what that scope is. It's not like we're adding all these buses and, you know, so I think that would help, so. But other than that, I thought this was great, so thank you.
Thank you.
No questions on my part, but again, thank you all for the tireless work you've been doing towards this.
Thank you.
Online, Sam Pauling?
Yeah, thank you, Lucas and Melody. It's a great job, as always. I have one quick question on the impact of underfunding the FY26 budget.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back to the slide, could you please elaborate what will be the impact in special education in district and out of district? It's not like you just put a letter there, right? So could you please elaborate on that?
Sure. What that was a protective, if a change happened. For example, you may recall last year, the OSD, I'm forgetting the acronym, because we use acronyms a lot around here. had a 14% increase, if you remember, to the budget last year. So that was out of our control, but that was something that had come from the state, down from the state to us, and it shifted our budget. So the reason I put special education in district, out of district services is if there are changes like that example in our budget, that would have an impact on an assumption that we made based on the line by line, which outlines some of the specifics around what we've put in for assumptions in our budget.
Yeah, good. That's all. Thank you very much again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Gallagher?
No questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so just a few, kind of piggyback on what my colleague was talking about in terms of the transportation and with that increase and that, that contractual rate. Can you just kind of elaborate? So like, is that a contract that the schools kind of negotiated, maybe, got a bad contract because it's going up 12%, or how exactly does that come about?
I know you're dying to answer this one. I'll answer, I have a piece of information too.
We put out a bid for a contract each, every 3 years, 4 years, whatever the term is. And once those bids come in, we go through a process to make the selection through a process that's dictated by the state. Once that contract is awarded, you really don't have any means to go back and renegotiate. The contract as it was written had these prices per run. It's set up by, if there's a bus that does just one tier, because we have 3 tiers, some do 2, some do 3, but it's the total number of buses and the total number of routes that determine what they bid the contract at. We knew that this price was going to exist 4 years ago when the contract was awarded. So this is not a surprise. The only additional piece of this contract is the bus for the shelter students, but that's not paid for through that line item. It's paid through the grant. So the increase is purely a factor of what the contract stated at the time, and I will tell you it was the only bid we got.
I wasn't the superintendent at the time, but we were coming off of COVID, if you remember. And I know that busing in particular had sustained impacts when buses weren't running and dropping off. So I believe, in conversations I've had with other central office employees during that time or whatnot, I think these contracts, for anyone who had that timing of after COVID and getting in, I think there was some of that in how it was bid, and then that's where you see an increase because of some of the fallout from some of that. That's my understanding. We will need to go through that process again. I don't know the time frame for that right now, but
Yeah, you should be starting that pretty soon if you're going to put out a bid for the fall, to start in the fall.
Thank you. And I think especially because, has been mentioned before, everything with the reorg, and when they kind of see that big increase, the two kind of concepts get conflated. So to be able to say, this is something that was on the horizon, known entity for quite some time, is very helpful. So thank you very much.
and that percentage is for this next school year. So just to be clear, the bidding in the fall isn't for a different rate in the fall. We're living with that rate that's in your budget this year. It's a matter of getting bids and going through that process for the following school year, just to be clear, okay? FY '27.
And just one other question. This one, I know it's in our budget books, it's chapter 31, page 31, with the revenue sources. They kind of spoke about chapter 70, and then also like circuit breaker. So I know, we've been constantly kind of hearing and talking about kind of living, within 2.5% and staying within 2.5%. And so when we look at our revenue sources, what I'm seeing, like the chapter 70 increase, did that increase by 2.5%, the revenue that we received?
No, the increase was less than 2.5%, and it's not structured as a percentage. It's structured based on a dollar amount per pupil. So we'll be getting $75 per student based on our foundation enrollment for next year. And that's the increase that you're seeing in our Chapter 70 state aid.
And then what about in terms of the circuit breaker?
Circuit breaker is formula-based, and it also is dependent on the amount that's allocated by the governor, and then ultimately, through the process of the House and the Senate and then the Conference Committee. The amount that was committed this year for this fiscal year, FY '25, was less than what was committed in FY '24. What the governor has put into the budget for FY '26 is an increase from FY '25. Whether we see any of that is to be determined. It's dependent upon the number of students that we have out of district, the cost for those students in their program, so that there's really several pieces to where we end up with circuit breaker. And I wouldn't expect a significant increase in either direction unless we have some significant increases in expenses.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions right now? Kind of, all right. Water handy. So again, I'll read the specific line item, the number, and the title, along with the FY '26 proposed budget. Any issues, just kind of go and shout out if you have a hold. Maybe for those online, if you want to unmute yourself, or at least unmute yourself as you kind of know that line item is coming up, that might be helpful. All right, so we'll start. 1110 School Committee, $16,524. 1210 Superintendent's Office, $349,107. 1220 Assistant Superintendent's Office, $188,111.
Hold.
1410 Business and Finance, $360,652. 1420 Human Resource, $340. I practice these numbers. 1430 Legal Services School Committee, $135. Okay. 2110 District-wide Curriculum Instruction, $1,049,659.
Hold.
What do we got? I got Dave and Al. 2120 Department Head Team Chair, $1,396,019.
Hold.
Same combo.
Mhm.
2130 Instructional Tech Leadership, $333,266.
Hold.
Snuck it in there.
Yeah.
2210 Principal's Office, $3,587,066. 2250 Administrative Technology, $79K. 2305 Teacher's Classroom, $28,299,370.
Hold. Hold.
2310 Teacher's Classroom Sped, $11,023,638. 2320 Therapeutic Services, $4,038,073.
Hold. Hold.
2324 Long-Term Substitutes. Sorry, quick clarification, is that listed as zero?
Yep.
2325 Substitutes total, $450,000. 2330 Educational Assistance, $5,552,000.
Hold. Hold. I'm highlighted.
2340 Librarians, $134,304. Step out for a moment.
2352, instructional coaches, 1,689,014.
Hold.
And I will also hold.
Me as well.
Well,
Kathy, was that you too?
We should have like the earmuffs instead.
All right, 2356, professional development, 122,200.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. My apologies. Two, 3, 5, 4, instructional coach stipend, 144,000. All right.
All right, 2358, vendor professional development, 48,347. 2410, textbooks, media materials, 170,463. 2415, other instructional materials, library, 10,275. 2430, general supplies, 339,141. 2440, other instructional services, 2,500. 2451, instructional technology, 63,500. 2453, library technology hardware, listed as 0. $24.54, instructional hardware, 120,000. $24.55, instructional software, 205.26. $27.10, guidance counseling, 2,704,399.
Hold.
Hold.
That was just gonna be one of you that time. 2720, testing and assessment, 47,279. 2800, psychological services, 726,628.
Hold.
3200, medical health services, 880,218. 3300, transportation services, 4,406,457. 3400, food service total, again, that's probably listed as 0. 3510, athletics, 1,861,000. 3520, other student activities, 210,000. 4130, utilities, this one should read 9,609. 4450, technology maintenance, 1,484,920.
We have 5,200, fixed charges, insurance total, 8,029,853.
Hold.
And lastly, 5,500 other fixed charges, 62,000.
And then 9,000 out of district total, 8,672,669.
Hold.
All right. Thank you all. And so again, right now, what we'll do is we'll kind of go down those holds. And then once all kind of questions are answered, if everyone's comfortable giving up their, like releasing their hold, that would be great. But then we'll also then open it up to questions, comments from those in council chambers and those online as well. So we'll start with 1220, Assistant Superintendent Office. Dr. Griffith?
Understanding the decrease in the transfer of the district physician costs, this actually identified in a couple locations, wanting to understand where that went.
You're looking at the finance office instead of the assistant superintendent. You're looking at 1410 instead of 1220.
Appreciate it, thank you.
All right. 1420, Human Resources. Al?
So just sure. Ken cannot do it all by himself. Is that the case?
That is correct.
Okay, and I just wanted to call out, because I mean, just so that folks have some context around this, we've had a very busy year of hiring and trying to bounce back from the initial failed override, and I don't know if we have numbers around how many interviews that were done, how much work that was done to get folks, just because I think people should understand that this is an important need, and I know I joked around that Ken can't do it by himself, but I think he probably deserves the assistance.
I think I'll speak because Ken will save you from coming up to the mic. If you like. Basically, the assistant to the assistant HR director for human resources, major responsibilities within the organization. We've experienced it. We are an organization, you've seen the numbers in previous slides that talk about 1,200 employees. So whether you are a full-time employee or a coach or someone anyone who is an employee under that umbrella, in their world, it doesn't matter how many hours you work if you're an employee, because you still need to be onboarded, you still have to have all those pieces that fall into place, so that's one piece. The other piece is we've looked at the amount of work that happens with negotiating with multiple unions under the umbrella of schools is one area. You did talk a lot about hiring, and then also wanting to improve our systems around hiring. That right now, when you only have one person and the secretary who've been managing a department, our district as large as ours, it's definitely, we've had challenges. On the other side of it is, there's a lot of information that we are updating and trying to keep right around seniority, around coordinating with our town counterparts around benefits and different issues that just come up within regard to when you think of human resources, if you work at a company, the work that they do just in general around employees in general. So there's a lot of work coming out of that office, and there's a lot of license tracking that needs to happen across the district for all of our educators or folks who have to maintain a certificate, and ultimately trying to look at how can we create better systems that allow us to get more up to speed with onboarding. Right now, we do a lot of systems that we've created just out of necessity, but we're looking to how can we create a better onboarding process across the district when we bring people on, a better workflow. So that's the reason you see that. That was, you may recall, some of that was seed money that we received through some of the funding from the summer. It was clearly outlined. As we've made different decisions within our organization in the central office around reallocating some of the FTE, we're able to continue to sustain that position as we move forward within the budget. So some reclassifications occurred at our level too, to make that happen. So,
Thank you.
All right. District-wide curriculum. Sorry, Dave.
Thank you. So for most of my holds come from the same kind of motivation here. So I think, everyone knows what a teacher is and what teachers do, but we see a number of position titles in our budget book that people might not be familiar with. Seeing lots of acronyms: SLP, DLI, ESL, BCBA, OT, teacher chair, school psychologist, counseling. I'm not saying these are all in this line. I'm saying in all the lines I held, and not all these. Some of these might be student facing, some of these might not be, but I just thought this would be a good opportunity, because we're looking through the budget, to kind of ask and highlight how these positions support education and our student experience. So for this, for the district-wide curriculum and instruction, so what do these positions do and how do they support our students' education?
So these cover the student services director's salaries, the assistant superintendent for student services salary, and the two directors for the Office of Teaching and Learning and their respective secretaries.
Okay, and can you just expand a little bit on how their work kind of trickles down to the students and their day-to-day?
Sure. I'd love to.
Please.
So student services, so what do? So we oversee basically special ed services for all the students, so special ed programming, fiscal responsibility. We do the hiring of all of our special educators, related service providers. I also oversee the health services, so all the nurses, the LPNs, and that programming. Sign off on the different mandates that we have through the Board of Health and whatnot. We also cover 504s, which is our, for students with disabilities who just require accommodations. We oversee that. We oversee investigations. We oversee bullying programming and bullying prevention. We oversee Title IX investigations. Oh gosh, whatever else the superintendent asked me to do. Professional development for all special educators and student services staff. Mental health. All our mental health counselors, I oversee them and their programming, their professional development, anything that supports the student. So we oversee basically everything that the Office of Teacher and Learning doesn't.
All right, well, yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate the explanation.
And I had jumped the gun, I meant the next one. So flag me for 2120 if I'm not there, sorry. I was like, why did I do that one? I didn't highlight it.
All right, so then you're good with that one. While we do 2120, we'll start with Al.
Okay, cool. So, one, Jana, as I said earlier, thank you for these notes on the side. I think this is really helpful and it helps get a context of what's going on. But can you speak to where, are these net new positions or are these reclassifications? And if they are reclassifications, where did they come from? Which budget item?
Sure, I can expand the budget line item you might need to help me with.
Yeah, those
But-
are the department heads and team chairs.
Yep. So the 4 department heads at the middle school was a reclassification during the reorganization. So those 4 department heads, one being math, one being STE, one being English and social studies, ultimately would have same responsibilities that our department heads have at the high school, where they oversee a department. They're responsible for orchestrate or organizing and facilitating department meetings, professional learning, in curriculum implementation and work, at the building-based level. So that was the reallocation. We formerly had CET roles at the middle school, the curriculum enhancement teachers, which was 3 full-time employees over the 3 middle schools. So I would say that was kind of where that reallocation came from, as well as we had one curriculum leader. We formerly had 2, but had reduced 1 in a few years prior due to budgetary constraints. And so that was where kind of the reallocation of those positions went into these roles. And then the increase of a 0.5 team chair was to create alignment in kind of caseloads and workloads across the district to ensure elementary team chairs, middle team chairs, and high school team chairs had, similar caseload and workloads.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then just a question on the department head role. Are they also student facing as well?
They are. So department heads teach 3 courses throughout the day. So any given day, depending upon how the schedule works, high school, middle school would be a little different. So that is completely student facing. And then they are also kind of support tier 2 intervention supports in different ways. And then, work within classrooms with teachers to support. Like I can speak to the CET roles, which was similar at the middle level. And department heads are consistently going into classrooms at the high school as well to support teachers in a variety of ways.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I add two points to that too? There's also observations from the content area lens, so you have a principal of a building, and you have one principal now overseeing multiple, 1,000 students, multiple departments, but ultimately the department heads serve a role in looking at just from the content lens perspective, right, on each of those content areas that they're responsible for. And the other piece is around when we hire, when we look to recruit and hire, the department heads play a role in that process of interviewing to making sure we're vetting candidates from the pedagogy lens, the teaching lens experience, but also their content area lens, and having someone who has that expertise in the room has been very valuable over time, screening resumes, looking at all those pieces. So just would add that as well.
Thank you for the explanation. You just about covered my question, because you talked about department heads, but maybe you could just briefly touch upon what a team chair does.
Sure. A team chair is basically your team leader for your special ed department at every building. So they organize the meetings, the team meetings. So they'll be the first contact with the parents if there's a referral for special education testing, or if a parent has concern. They're basically that middle person in between the parent and the team, and they really get everything organized for the meetings and whatnot. They do coaching, they do student observations, and then they bring, any concerns that teachers are having regarding students and whether they need, more services or more restrictive placement possibly. They bring that up to my office with the assistant directors of student services.
Thank you.
All right, and 2130. Al,
You go first. You held this one too, right?
that was just you.
That was just me?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
flying solo.
All right, just making sure. Oh, you didn't want to. So 2130. Can we just speak to what do instructional tech teachers do in this change?
Sure. So there was, we last year implemented instructional technology. So around February, we put a Department of Ed report card out, and we continually were, I don't want to say cited, but got reported on the state for not teaching the DLCS standards, which are the digital learning computer science standards at our elementary level. So a few years back, we invested in this. It's on the elementary report card now, which is a great thing for students. And they really work to, if we think about digital citizenship and things of that nature, really work to, at a developmentally appropriate level, kind of support students in that. So this was an investment of trying to say K through 12, we live in a digital world, and we are invested in supporting our students and knowing how to appropriately use technology. And also, there's elements of coding, and there's still some curriculum development that's happening here. So I would say, I hope that answers your question.
Yep, it does. It just gives me another question. So it went from 0.4 FTE up to 3.6.
So because the roles this year are shared, so we have 4 humans who are doing either 0.8 or 0.4 of an instructional tech teacher role. So what we're moving towards is saying, let's have 3 humans teach 1.0 FTE of instructional tech, which is the 0.4 FTE increase there. And then they also currently hold a DLI pointage, but whenever anyone holds that kind of, not whenever. It's just hard to manage district digital learning integration on a 0.2, 0.4 bandwidth.
If I may,
Yeah.
there are also some instructional tech teachers that were recorded, charged to the teacher's line instead of being charged to this line. So this year, we're trying to clean it up, so we move them where they belong.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's clear. So it's not that we had 0.4 in FY25. It just was allocated differently.
Yes.
So going forward, it'll be an easier apples to apples comparison.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Terrific. And then you got 2210.
Yep. And just wanted to call it just more. This is more of this reorganization efficiencies based off of economies of scale. Is that correct?
Yes,
For-
that is correct.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. But 2305. Dave?
Yes, so teachers, this is teacher salaries, and it's by far the largest item that we have in our budget. So those who are concerned about how much money we're spending in the school budget, this is the item to look at. So it's the single largest opportunity to reduce the budget spending, if that's what we're concerned about, is total spending. So could you please, and you touched upon this tonight, last week, and the efforts we've done through reorganization, could you please just elaborate on how the work that we've been doing through the reductions and the reclassifications makes the most of the salaries that we're spending for our teachers?
Yes, so I'll start, and my teammates can certainly dive in. The slide deck ahead of this line by line tried to illustrate where those reclassifications and where those FTEs were. Like I said, we have reduced our staff by 20. So that's a reduction of what we would have had, but it's a result of reorganization. This is one of those things where we won't be able to do that again. And I'm remembering someone at the budget workshop who said, if this is a time that happened, then you should call that out and make that known. We were able to do that because of the much needed the unification of middle schools and then our elementaries. At the same time, we looked at very clearly how many kids are in each class, like grade, and then how many teachers do you need to teach those grades so that you can fall within the class range as much as possible. And I think we've illustrated for you in that these are the types of, these are the sections you need to teach. And then also we looked at, okay, how about nursing? What about your counseling staff? What about special education, your English language learners? All those different types of positions, how do we create parity and criteria? And you heard about team chairs to make sure that we have equity and parity across levels and across the district. So the idea is what we were able to do with the reductions and then the reclassing is support a system that's been newly organized. So the apples to oranges, and then saying what types of positions are needed in this model for us to be the most successful. You heard about department heads, for example. You've heard about restoring 3 elementary education teachers back in so that we have the right parity across sections. So this budget represents for us our best foot forward in order to land the redistricting and the reorganization in the best place possible to provide the level of support that we believe we can provide with this. It's predicated on solving that structural deficit, but that's what would we require. Anything less will mean a reduction in those services. So we've really looked at economy of scale is a term, but I use that with all sincerity. There were economies of scale, and we tried our best to illustrate that to the community, to show that we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible around the budget that we build and the allocation of resources and putting the right resources and reclassifying where we need them, and then being honest about where we don't require the same level of FTE and how do we do this. Was everything restored that everyone has seen in over 20 years? No. But we're also trying to stabilize ourselves here and show a model that we can sustain if we can move forward through solving that deficit.
Just to put a financial perspective to it as well. In a normal year, if you were not adding teachers, not decreasing staff, you would see about a 4.5% increase in that line item. Between COLA and steps and lanes, you would see that. So you'd go from 28.2 million in FY25, adding 4.5%, you'd be at 29.6 million. So you're seeing about a $1.4 million savings, so to speak, because of the reorganization. So it does have some financial benefit, obviously, while we've been able to repurpose a lot of those positions.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for the explanation. I have a follow-up, if I may. So, yeah, you just elaborated on kind of just making our teacher workforce as efficient as possible and those economies of scale, as you said. But then there's getting the most of our money there. But then there's the flip side of that. We could also we could cut teachers and then have classroom sizes shoot through the roof.
Right.
So why is that a bad thing?
Well, having the appropriate class size to teach matters. Just a former teacher here, right? Having classes that are too large just become really hard for you to provide the level of attention that students require. We heard this mentioned at the Joint Budget Subcommittee listening session recently, just around that idea. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we're providing the students and the ability to educate the students in a manageable class size range, which the ratios are online, they're in the deck. We stick to those as our recommendations to try to put the class sizes in. And I think it does matter. I'm excited about the idea of having teachers with multiple sections in a building teaching the same grade. From a collaboration standpoint, I'm also excited about the stability of having 8 sections in the school, so when you have move-ins or move-outs, you've sustained and created more stability within the system. So these things are really important when you think about class size and the impact of change. Those are huge pieces, but I think it does matter, and us being able to support, it's the teachers, and it's all the folks that work with teachers to support instruction that's happening in the classroom, because that's what it's all about, and that's how we built the system. Think about concentric circles. You need every piece of it for it to work.
Can I add one element to that? I think we've also talked about and presented on the idea of building a multi-tiered system of supports. That includes student services, that includes other positions, it includes classroom teachers and class sizes, but it includes much more, a wide array of staffing to support a tiered system of supports. And I think to answer additionally and provide more information on, it's not just increasing class sizes if there's reductions, it's really chipping away at multiple years, many, many years of trying to build out that tiered supports. And I will say from a positive perspective, in thinking about unifying one middle school, the work that we've been able to come together to do and the reallocation allows us to start to put some more structures in place to support our middle school students in a way that you've heard us build out at the elementary level. But I think that those are the other things, that it's not just class size that matters in the system.
Thank you all.
Nope, all set, thank you.
And, do you want to lead us with 2320?
Yep, 2020, yeah, therapeutic services. So looking at this, we have 2 line items, the salaries and contracted services. Salaries saw a sizable decrease, but contracted services saw that jump. Can you
I would
speak
love to explain to that as well.
Thank
So
you.
contracted service, so what falls under this line is basically any of the related services that we don't have in district staff. So like our educational audiologists, some of our students require that related service. We need to contract out for that because we don't have enough to have a full-time person in the district. It might be our vision specialists, it might be our orientation and mobility specialists. These are all related services that some of our students need to access their curriculum. The other pieces that go into contracted services are our consultants. So we have a number of consultants that consult to our teams, such as a clinical psychologist. We have an autism specialist from MGH. We also have a consultant from, I'm drawing a blank, from a language-based program, Landmark School, to help us with our language-based instruction. So that's where those services come out of that line, as well as our contract with the New England Center for Children. So our net classrooms, that's where that contract funds come out. That line funds those classrooms that we have with them. And if you remember, we are adding a classroom at the high school because we do have current 8th graders that are moving up to the high school. So that's why it increased so much more.
Gotcha, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I think that covered it really well. Maybe just a follow-up to that, so a lot of things that you just mentioned, a lot of things that we're legally required to provide students with special needs in order to give them the education that they deserve and that we're obligated to give them.
Absolutely. So some of our students with autism require ABA home services. That's where we contract out for as well for that. One-to-ones, if our students in out-of-district programs require one-to-one, that's where that line item, those funds come out of. So it's anything, mostly it's based on student need
Thank you.
and to better serve our students.
How about 2330?
Yeah, so educational assistants, so could you maybe please expand upon who these people are and how they support our students' education?
Absolutely. So educational support professionals are what I call, I don't want to use the,
It's my
they are-
first job to say it.
they are so important, they are so integral. So they are our instructional, they support our students instructionally, behaviorally, and other supports in and outside of the classroom. And they are under the direction of either the special educator or the general ed teacher. So basically, they help with prompting our students, providing the accommodations for our students so they can access the curriculum. They might do some pre-teaching. They might take a student out and, you know, scribe for them when they have a test. Scribe meaning the student will tell them their answers and they'll write it down for them. They might do movement breaks for some of our students that require that movement break outside of the classroom. They also help with supervision in the lunchroom, at recess. They facilitate some, you know, positive interaction, natural interactions and socialization on the playground and whatnot. So they are really integral to our programming for all of our students.
Can I add to that? Because
Absolutely.
also in this line item is activity monitors, which
Mhm.
are an integral part of the daily operation of the building. They support the lunchtime in our elementary schools especially, and recess, and also interventionists, academic interventionists are in here as well. So when we talk about MTSS, these folks support that, as well as our ESPs as well, but.
Thank you, and just to follow up to that, so it sounds like these positions, they don't, it sounds like they provide excellent services, essential support, but it's not just at the individual student level, but they're also, through their position, supporting the teacher and allowing the teacher to focus on the classroom as a whole by taking extra work off their plate that they might otherwise be needed to have their attention diverted to one student in particular, correct?
Correct, right. They're able to take small groups, they're able to, you know, do some flexible grouping inside the classroom, which helps with the MTSS model, because then teachers can do some direct instructions, you know, ESPs can do some other instruction, and it really gives every student what they need, including students without disabilities, so all students in the building.
Thank you.
They're the utility player on the team, where you have, basically, you could be assigned one-to-one to a student, all the way up to managing a library,
Yeah.
or a kindergarten classroom or two. There's this a wide range of skills and ways in which we utilize them.
Thank you.
Yep, so I noticed that the FTE line is blank on that one for the salaries for the ESPs. Is that just a clerical error? Row 31.
We do have the
330?
2330, we do have the FTE. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Are you looking at the subline, Mr. Charles, or no?
Oh, no, I was not looking at the subline, so thank you. I was
Okay.
looking at the
Oh, yeah.
other line, okay.
Okay.
Disregard.
Okay.
All right. Step up, please.
All right, so next we had 2352 instructional coaches. Why don't we give the people a break from listening to Al and I, and we'll go to Erin online first.
Yeah, just hoping for a little bit of clarification as to the increase there. And then I noticed too a difference from the line by line to, sorry, I'm pulling up another document. The budget summary document that was sent through shows just a different line item amount. So was just hoping for a little bit of clarity on that one.
Sure, and Aaron, there's the updated line by line that's being presented in the chambers and also provided to school committee is available. It's online as well, just for folks listening. We have it on there, but also I'm wondering if you have a version that might not reflect it, but I'm happy to talk through the position, and I'll kick it over to Dr. Rogers around these positions and the value they bring to the district. Would that answer your question? And then we can talk through kind of the FTE and the reclassifications and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you want to kick it off?
Sure. So included in this line are content specialists at the elementary and middle school, which we're really excited about saying middle school at this point. So part of this is a restoration of specialist positions we had previously reduced. So we had reduced over time, we used to have 6 literacy specialists across our elementary schools and 6 math. And we are in this budget is included to restore those positions. In addition, there is a need to support STE, so science, technology, engineering, from a curriculum perspective. So there's positions there included. At our middle school, we are including positions 2 math specialists and 1 literacy specialist. And so what I would say the goal of all of these are, and I feel like a broken record at this point, but they really are the folks that lead curriculum work in the building, that talk about data, that build assessments, that build that data culture. They are in classrooms, they are working with small groups of students, they are working with teachers to co-teach lessons, they are pulling out intervention groups, they're planning and prepping for interventionists to do like 8-week remediation cycles. So they play an integral role in kind of the leadership team at the building, and also in directly supporting students and teachers.
Just for perspective too, those are 6 positions for 2,000 elementary students. So just to give some perspective of kind of how many literacy specialists there are, that's 6 people providing a service in tiers across 2,000 students across our schools.
Yep.
Same for math.
Yep.
And STE.
And I would, recently we presented elementary report card modifications. Like, these are the folks that are at the heart of that work, and that are not only intricately involved in standards to ensure that we're teaching standards appropriately, that we're holding high expectations, that our curriculum is aligned, but also trying to create kind of communication tools for parents as well. So just another added piece.
Thank you. Aaron, you all set?
Yeah, I'm set.
Thank you. KP, you had a hold in this as well, correct?
Yeah, and just one quick question on the subscriptions, What comes under the subscriptions?
I don't think there's subscriptions and,
No, I was looking at the different screen. Don't worry about it. I'm all good. Thank you.
okay.
All right, we'll go to you, Al.
And thank you for the clarification on that. I know last meeting, which feels like a eternity ago, but it was last week, we talked about the math challenges at the middle school.
Yeah.
How many of these will be math specialists at the middle school level?
2.
2, okay, thank you.
Yep. And I would say in addition, there are, and I would say this across the board, but specifically because you asked about math, we also have the department head as an instructional leader, and just to bring back to the prior question of, they do teach at a reduced caseload, so teaching 3 courses allows them the opportunity and flexibility to support in building out this enrichment, this remediation, but the tiered systems of supports.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And my question was answered throughout all that, so thank you very much for the detailed explanation.
All right. 2710, guidance counseling.
Yes, could we just get some clarification on what these positions do?
Sure. So these basic guidance counselors, really they're our school counselors. I'd like to change the name, at least at the elementary and middle level, to school counselors. So they provide mental health, counseling and social emotional support for our students at the elementary and middle level, as well as the high school level. They can be students with IEPs, or they can be students just in the general ed curriculum. They're not specific to special ed students on IEPs. Any student can have access to a counselor that they need it. So they can do one-to-one counseling, they can do some lunch bunch groups for some social pragmatics and social skills training. They can do, for students who are dysregulated, they can do, acute, acute treatment of, trying to regulate the student, providing breaks. They consult with the parents, they consult with the school-based teams, as well as outside service providers as needed for all of our students in all of our schools. We also have guidance counselors at the high school who are our traditional guidance counselors. If you think back when you were in high school, who you meet with to figure out what courses you want, what your college or career path is going to be, and whatnot. And they also provide some mental health support as well. So, very integral part, as Mr. Giguere had shared earlier. We've really been working hard over the last few years to increase our supports for our students. We are in a mental health crisis for our students. The needs of our students is just, it's scary of the needs of our students and how many students have anxiety at really even the younger ages, and just the supports that students need. So the more mental health support we can have in our schools will prevent students from needing that outpatient, day programs and whatnot, which there's no mental health counselors out besides the schools out there, so everyone has wait lists. So as much as we can do in school is the best. We would love to get into classrooms and do more tier 1 support, so really do whole class lessons. We're hoping with the reorg and having, more counselors available at each complex, we'll be able to actually get in the classrooms and do some tier 1 support.
Thank you. And I guess just to follow up to that, so I think there might be a number of people out in the community who think like, well, we didn't have these positions when I went to school, so like, why do kids need them now? And so you touch upon that a little bit. So like, why are these positions more necessary now? Maybe they weren't necessary before, and we just weren't having them. So like,
we weren't having them. The mental health needs, right now are for our students are really high. I mean, it's when you're in the schools, you see it. The behavioral needs and the mental health needs are really increased. Our students are suffering out there. And we could go into reasons why, and this is not the time and place, but we really need to support our students. Because if our students are emotionally present, then they can access the curriculum and then they can achieve academically.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so thank you for that explanation. I know we've had students come and speak about the mental health concerns, especially at the middle level. I do see though that there is a 0.7 reduction. Can we speak to like how will it work? And
I think how, John, do you remember? Because we carried over all of our staff. So it might be a reallocation of it, like from a line, like a salary from a line or something.
okay.
Because all of our FTEs carried over. We didn't reduce any counselors.
I'm gonna check on that, okay.
Okay.
Want to go on to the next one? We'll circle back to that.
Yep.
So we got 2,800. Dave?
Thank you. So same question with us. What are these positions and how do they support our students? Psychological services.
Sorry. All right, so this account, sorry, I don't know all the accounts by the top of my head. So what this account is this is, again, contracted services. So these are outside neuropsychologists and clinical psychologists. So sometimes our students require a more in-depth psychological evaluation. So we would, our school-based psychologists, can do cognitive, psychoacademic testing, but sometimes you need that clinical experience, so we might contract with a clinical psychologist in the area or a neuropsychologist. They also do some risk assessments if we have students that we really need to do a risk assessment for, so that's where these funds come out of. This is also like supplies and materials. This is where our academic testing comes out of, so if we need to buy new updated testing materials and whatnot for our psychologists and special educators, it comes out of this line item as well.
Thank you.
I was going to ask a question myself on that. Say like 20, 30 years ago, is that something that the schools are expected to provide service and fund?
I wasn't in this position 20 or 30 years ago, but no, I would say probably not. Mental health wasn't as acknowledged, I guess, or, accepted.
I think there were other systems in place, state schools, different ways in which, and those are, not your typical student that might be navigating a public public school.
Right.
But ultimately, you did have other types of services where students went to receive different types of support depending on the need. So what has happened over time is we are educating more students within our four walls, and therefore, in order to do that and do that effectively, you need to provide the level of support that they need to be successful. I think Morano hit it on the head. In order to access your education, you need to be in the right state to be able to do that, and I think that's really our goal. Whether you agree politically, philosophically, it's around, we're trying to make sure we're putting kids in chairs where they are able to learn what they need to learn in order to be successful after they graduate. So that's kind of the idea at a very basic level, but that's the charge, and then that's when you build the system around it.
And I greatly appreciate that, you know, because, yeah, there certainly have been, you know, year after year after year, others, you know, those safety nets that might have been kind of picked up by other departments, agencies, state, that continue to kind of fall down on the school, where it's a different environment than, you know, what many of us have been accustomed to, and certainly as we kind of keep going back further in time, then it's a different school experience than, you know, in past generations. So thank you very much, I really appreciate that. Then next one. All right, this one also will step out.
Which one is this?
Oh, sorry, this is
5,200.
5,200 fixed costs.
All right, then we have 5,200 fixed charges / insurance, that is L.
So just to confirm, this is just all of the health insurance that the educators have that's under the town plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know there was discussion, and I think this was brought up during the joint budget listening session. So right now, only the schools are the only only town organization that has health insurance in their line item, correct?
We are,
Okay. Is there, I know that it's, the money gets taken care of regardless of it.
right.
I guess, what would need to be done to be able to get this out of our overall line item, our budget, and have it in the town and align it like everybody else?
I think that would be, my opinion, I don't know that shifting the health insurance is going to yield the result that everyone might think, and that's just me just looking at this. The idea here with this, the health insurance, if we delineate what the increases are, you'd be able to see clearly from what we're asking for in our budget and what we have for fixed costs. If we were able to delineate from what health insurance is, I think the idea is the spirit of is kind of an apples to apples idea. I think that's what people are trying to, that's the sentiment I'm receiving. But at the end of the day, having it here or having it outside, the money will go.
Correct.
But I think it's about trying to, I think what I'm hearing is a sentiment around just being clear about an increase to the school budget with or without health insurance. So rather than, I guess the bigger idea is around if it's in our budget or not, being clear about what are our increases so that we can be clear about what they are with health insurance and without is one thing. I thought Mr. Griffith did a good job of kind of explaining kind of what the percentage increase is on top of our budget for this specific line. I think the bigger idea is how do we bring some of those health insurance costs drivers? What action steps can we take as a system to bring those numbers down, for one? And two, the idea is when we do budget, and I'll let Bob speak to this a little bit, just around when we budget for those costs, we try to take into consideration the employees we have today and also whatever we're expecting for the next budget cycle. So do you want to hit on that, Bob, at all?
I think just to respond to your question as well, as far as a process, folks who've been in Franklin for a long time probably know when and how the agreement came about for health insurance to be part of the school department's budget, just as there's an agreement related to facilities being part of the town's budget, IT is part of the school department's budget, and then how those are split from there. So I think to make changes, it has to be a collaborative process between the school committee and town council, town administrator to facilitate that change if there is an interest in doing that. And as the superintendent mentioned, in the grand scheme of things, financially, I'm not sure it has an impact, because in reality, if they take that on, then what's appropriated to us is likely to be a smaller amount to account for that. Unless facilities becomes part of us, but even that's not, they're not equitable. So I think there's a lot of conversation and negotiation that has to happen, and ultimately, it's not gonna make a difference in our bottom line as far as staffing, in my opinion.
Understood, and I guess I'm trying to get clarity as to, knowing that this is a neutral decision, impact regardless of where it is.
Yep.
So it's just the challenge to move it if there is no impact. That's, I guess, I'm not, it's not adding up to me, that's all.
Yeah, I think it, as Lucas said, it creates the vision that it's apples to apples, and when we're looking at a 2.5% increase, just as all the other departments in town are, it is comparing apples to apples, and folks perceive that when you have health insurance added in, it's hard to make a comparison, and holding us to that 2.5% becomes more of a challenge then. In reality, when you look at what's being provided to us through the appropriation, I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference.
The other piece I just would mention is that story slide that we put out. My goal through this process is we try to think about, it's February 4th, that was the 5th today, but it's the 4th, and really thinking about where we are today, ahead of schedule, with a budget before you that is, you saw from the town administrator's report the allocations and where we landed with our budget. Based on a $3.6 million solve, I think there's a shared interest among anyone who's in the seat I'm in or in a role similar, is around making sure that we are supporting a unified message around what does this budget represent and how do we make it happen. And I think it's all predicated on having that structural deficit solved, right? So the idea being, I think the focus is how do we land this particular budget as it's presented, and I don't want us to get lost in what could be a larger discussion. I just don't think that for what, and I think you hit it on the head, Bob, was just around that discussion versus what we need to do to kind of move and get this done. And we have to think of this in a series of conversations and long-term, but ultimately, what do we do between now and the end of the year to try to be as successful as possible in landing what we believe is the recommended budget, and then think more long-term, about anything else that are on people's minds.
So, understood. And one thing that just came to me, the thing of the benefit of this, I know that the cost for insurance is something that's an unknown, because it has to be negotiated. If it wasn't in the budget, I think it would make it easier for you all to get a budget and establish it, because you're not having to worry about how does the insurance account for that. So just a thought, but it's something we could talk later on after we get past the structural deficit.
All right, 9,000 added district total.
Yep, so saw some big jumps. The line 40 for the contractual services for the collaborative, 400,000 decrease. Can we just speak to that a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, so it's again, this is special ed, right? So it just depends where kids moved and what kind of programs they move in and out of. So I can't speak to specifics because they're student specific. However, if students, some students age out, so then we can minus that tuition. Sometimes we get move-ins that come in and out of district placements, so we have to add that tuition for the following year. Sometimes kids move from collaborative to private day settings, which costs more. Sometimes they move to residential. Sometimes they come back to district. So it really just fluctuates, and it depends on the students, their needs, and what type of placement that they require.
Okay. And while this is what we're projecting, because of that uncertainty, this could change
This could change.
positively or negatively.
From now until May, it could change, and it could, yes, exactly,
All right.
exactly. This is the one piece of special ed that is so hard to predict, because you never know.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to add to that, it is one of those unpredictables, not just in the budgeting process, but also during the budget year, the fiscal year that you're in. And, you know, one of the challenges, and the legislature saw this as an issue, is what happens if you have a move-in that is a residential placement out of state, $300,000. How do you account for that? And so they allow a lot of districts to create a special ed stabilization fund. So it's something you may want to explore so that you're able to have that available as something that is your fund in the event that you have something significant like that. So just in the back of your mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then the question with the FTEs from that 2710.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was like, wait.
We're trying to figure that out.
Okay,
I
no,
believe we
that's-
did, I believe we did.
Oh.
There is a one staff member that's between two lines, school psych and the school adjustment counselor. I believe that last year, or FY '25, they were charged to that same 2710 line instead of being charged to the school psych line and the 2710. So this year, we are just cleaning things up and charging that employee to the correct lines.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Terrific. All right, so open up to the public in just a moment, but for any other kind of questions, concerns from the committee, or otherwise all of the holds have been, everyone's feeling good?
Yeah, no questions, but once again, I'm just gonna say that this was probably one of the better, probably best.
That was the easiest, right?
Yeah, I mean, you had the information.
It wasn't easy though,
Yeah,
we
no,
gotta
it was,
say that.
yeah, exactly. So the work that you put in has shown through this documentation and.
It's
so.
not just, thank you, but it's not just my work. I mean, all of them contributed, all of them. So I'm not gonna take the credit by myself. Thank you, guys.
And it's completely correct. It's fantastic, it's stunning, it's so easy to read and kind of understand. I'm really excited for this to kind of come to FinCom. I think there's so many of their questions that they had asked kind of year over year that is right away, just based on how this is all presented and structured, is going to be answered, which is terrific. Truly, you know, we've already, said thanks so much just for the accelerated timeline, and then now we kind of have this over here, and now, hopefully you'll be able to go vote on this next week, and then you got a whole nother year before this comes up again. But with that said, we'll start, if there's any questions or comments from those in the council, and then we'll kind of go over those on Zoom.
Hello, Laura Minichelli, 98 Brook Street. I don't know if I need to say that, but I did. Librarians, I have a question about the ESP reduction from 5.7 to 1. And I'm just wondering how we are still going to provide services in the libraries in our schools with that reduction.
So I could just speak to the reclassification of library ESPs versus librarians. So the librarian line that had library ESPs, and I'm turning my back to the world because I'm actually trying to the librarian line.
It's more important to speak to the mic, sorry.
Okay, thank you for the stagecoach. So the librarian line, for a certified librarian versus a library ESP, which is an ESP, One of the cleanup areas where Ms. Malati looked at was like looking at folks' role and then reclassifying them into what their job role is of an ESP, even though they're assigned to the library. Remember I talked about them being utility players? So where they previously would have been categorized in library, it was put all ESPs together in one area. So that's the reason, and that was a very good catch.
Can I add a comment or I guess follow up to that? I really appreciate that because I also think it's unfair to the profession sometimes to classify ESPs as librarians. I don't think you do that, but one of my long-term goals in Franklin would be to see librarians in each school. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in council chambers?
Steve Sherlock, 13 Magnolia. Also Franklin Matters and Franklin Public Radio. Tremendous work. I know I've done budgeting in the corporate world, but to try and do the budgeting with the redistricting 2 months ahead of time, kudos. I don't know how you're still standing with smiles on your face too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. A couple of minor clarifications in regards to, and I know it just came out this afternoon, but there may be some typos along the way, some things that caught my eye. On the one page in the overview where you had the special ed costing and then the program savings to the 5 million, I know you've talked to it, but there's 2 charts on there. The top chart shows kind of the 3 prior years. The bottom chart shows selected programs. You've talked to that, but it doesn't
Yes.
say selected programs. So if somebody only pulls the doc, you don't want to kind of set them up, go the wrong way. Suggestion on that. Out of district FTE pupils, I haven't heard that term before. Can you explain FTE pupils? It's also in one of the other pages. You have a tally further down on page 17 that talks about FTE pupils, but it doesn't really tally to the number mentioned earlier in the budget book itself.
Oh, in the book.
In the budget book, not in the presentation, sorry.
We can make some notes, Steve.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then, update the documents.
Right,
and refresh
just
them.
add a definition star, what the FTE pupil
Yep.
is. FTE I normally associate with full-time equivalent,
Yeah,
which generally is personnel resources, but I hadn't seen that applied to students as well, which clearly on a move-in, move-out,
it could be a title issue, like it could be pupil services, or it could be, we can look at what the,
that's fine.
I still need to locate it, but.
Right. The other piece, in enrollments, in your opening statement, you talk about 4589 enrollment for the year. The October report said 4616. So you've lost some students since October? That may be a typo, so rectify what the student population enrollment is. And in some cases, it may be different from October 1, because it's still dynamic.
Right, so the October 1st report is what we report to DESI, and that's how they base our funding and all of that. So
Correct.
that's one number. The McKibben report had its own projection, and that's what I tried to correct on the right-hand side.
I wasn't talking about projections, but in your executive summary, your statement, you're talking about,
Yes,
I
yes,
lead
I
the
understand.
district of 4589
Yep,
students,
Yep,
and that's not the 4616, so, yeah,
it's yes, we'll correct it. It's 4595 right now,
okay.
January 2025.
And I think to one of the questions earlier, I know a couple of years ago, the school committee asked, and the district came up with the chart or depiction of the other roles that are servicing in the classrooms. A quick glance through that, it looks like approximately half in some cases even less, teachers, air quotes, teachers, and the other student-directed professionals, right? So when you do a per teacher per pupil, are you including the other support professionals, or are you just using, quote, the classroom teacher? And that may be opening a bigger can of worms, but the point I was getting to is that, and I like the trend analysis, that while the enrollment has been going down, and Dr. Dutch talked to it in the prior meeting, and you've got the slide reference here as well, where the percentage of the students to the left, we've been seeing increases in English language learners and increases in special ed. While the number of teachers has been going down, the educational requirements, while you're losing teachers, you're actually gaining other high-paid professionals, which is why that's still a cost driver. And if that's true, that's part of the story that we need to tell. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from those in council chambers? How about any questions, comments from those online? Just hit the hand raise button. We'll okay. All right, so unless there's any other further comments or questions right now, I will entertain a motion to close the FY26 public budget hearing.
Motion to close the FY26 public budget hearing.
Second,
Second,
discussion deliberation. Roll call, Griffith,
Yes.
Charles,
yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Callahan, yes. Sampali,
Yes.
Gallagher.
Yes.
All right, terrific. Again, I want to thank everybody for all the incredible work that went into this, the questions that came out of it as well. Look forward to yet another Tuesday meeting next week on the 11th. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Can I-
adjourn.
Before you, can I just
I
talk through
apologize. Oh, yeah.
just next steps, just to give some key dates, if those are tuned in and online? Don't start the car yet, Dave. So basically, this timeline we provided last week, we wanted to share with you. Here we are, it's February 4th, we're at the budget, the open hearing. Tomorrow, we go in front of the town council for our capital requests. That process has been happening in tandem. That is not related to this budget or the operating budget, just to be clear, but there are some capital requests. As you know, every year, the town certifies free cash from town budgets that they did not use or expend. It goes into a pot. We then put in requests on behalf of the schools. This year, through that program, as you know, we put in costs associated with the move, with the special education vans, and a myriad of things related to reorg or facilities improvements needed at this stage. So I just wanted to put that out there, that tomorrow, that's requirement. It needs to go through FinCom and yeah, the process is it goes through FinCom and then it goes to a subcommittee of town council, and then it goes to the full town council tomorrow night to seek approval. So I just wanted to point that out, that that program exists to help us not include some of the things in the budget that we've asked for, but to try to tackle other projects, and we're included in that process and that program. As you move forward, you'll see the school committee meeting is on the 11th. That's where a vote will take place on this recommended budget. And then after that, you'll see a series of joint budget subcommittee listening sessions that will take place in a variety of locations. That's posted online on the town and schools websites. And then you'll see in April and May, you'll see the FinCom meeting for the budget hearing, which occurs annually along with the town council budget hearings. July 1 is the start of the fiscal year. So this is just information that we have online as well. We're happy to include it and provide it if anyone's looking for it.
I appreciate that. Any other kind of questions? The legislative forum on the 24th.
The legislative forum, bottom left-hand corner, the legislative forum on the 24th. Mr. Charles, you want to put a plug in for that, or?
You did a great job. so
Okay.
you're good.
All right.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good. All right.
Actually, sorry, one
Yep.
last thing. And I thought this was a great slide, the overview slide. Can you go back to the second to last slide that you had?
Oh,
Yeah, yes, the one before it. Actually, both of them are good, but I like this one better. Can we get this
Yes.
posted onto the Facebook page as an image, just so folks can just get it as a snapshot? Because I think this tells a really great story. The second one is helpful too, but I think this is a good one to get out to easily digest.
When we were putting this together, we were trying to come up with a one slide, just like bare bones, if you're not paying attention, you haven't had time to look at all the meetings and listen, just like, what's the idea, what does the budget represent? So that was the idea, was to take this and put it out there, but yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
All right.
We okay now? Because I've been hurt before. Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, why don't we, I'll entertain that one. McNeil, second.
Yep.
Griffith,
Yes.
Charles,
Yep.
McNeil,
Yes.
Callahan, yes. Sonpali,
Yes.
and Gallagher.
I was gonna say, what if I said no, just for Dave?
I'm gonna bang the gavel.
Yes.
Already lost.
Have a great
Good
one,
night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
These weeks I'm gonna week off.
Time to make a